We find ourselves back at the Witch's Echo, and this time we are able to take the portal to the Altar of Reflection. I'm not sure why we're allowed to access it this time around, or why it was closed off from us previously. It almost certainly has to do with Savathun, but the specifics are not quite clear. Regardless, we have found our way back to the entrance of the altar. Before gaining full access, we first have to pass the trials of oddities. From my previous visit, I remembered that the way to clear the puzzle was to shoot the slabs that don't have matching hive runes. This was pretty easy to do, but it's just the beginning. The rules of the puzzle stay the same, but the complexity is taken up a level. This time around, there are 4 containers near each of the corners of the room. On the containers, there exist 3 runic hive slabs, but one of them is an imposter. Shooting the odd one out reveals a hive symbol, and after doing that for each of the containers, we complete the trial. This was also not difficult to solve. In fact, I almost made it harder on myself by trying to overthink this puzzle by thinking that I had to memorize the symbols and matching the correct ones on each of the containers. It was much simpler than that. We were able to make our way in after completing these trials, and have to defeat some Lucent archivists managed by Zirash, Keeper of Memory. Once again, I have to mention that because this isn't legendary difficulty, this fight is a joke. This is also a good place to say that I felt that the puzzles were quite underutilized. Only having to complete 2 odd-one-out puzzles is odd. This could have been expanded much further to have been integrated with the Zirash boss fight. There isn't really any challenge in solving the puzzle aside from having to take the time to compare the rows of runes. Trying to do that while also fending off a boss, while ads are also rushing you down, seems like a much more interesting and, more importantly, engaging encounter than what we got. Instead, now it feels like the puzzle section and the boss fight are 2 completely separate events with little to no connection instead of being a proper build-up. After the fight, we are able to continue. Our objective now is simply called Memory, and thus I placed a crystal onto the altar.
I saw the end before it happened. My own death, brought on by the separation from my power. And in these final moments, I looked to the sky. Hello, old friend. I've chased you for a long time. First as an enemy, then as a collector, and finally, now, a supplicant. What is it the Guardians say? Devotion inspires bravery. Bravery inspires sacrifice. And sacrifice... Here we are. Wouldn't it be clever of you if after everything, you simply let me die? What a trick. Elegant. Is that it? If there is an answer, I don't hear it. Because now the world begins to fade. Incredible that I could forget something like that, isn't it? Such a storied life, erased. The light offers us a fresh start, but if we don't know where we came from, how will we know where to go? I'm so grateful to you for reminding me, for telling my story.
Wait. What is she talking about?
She remembers. We helped her remember.
Thanks for the memories, Guardian.
We have to leave.
That was quite the cutscene. The deep sight on this crystal really broke open this case, so let me try to break it down. First, Mara saw and encased Savathun completely. Savathun said that she saw her own death, brought about by the separation from her powers. This power is likely referring to the darkness, and more specifically, her worm. If this was the case, then now I'm confused at the identity of the worm we obtained from Sathona's temple. I'm still unsure of how exactly Savathun escaped Mara from such dire situations. We only recently discovered Savathun getting the light, so this couldn't have happened all that long ago. Although, maybe all Mara did was separate the worm from Savathun. This would technically leave the worm in Savathun's hands while still having stripped her of her power. Savathun is under the presence of the Traveler and is only just now taking out a piece of the crystal prison embedded into her. So although we don't know how Savathun escaped, she didn't really get far. Through her dying breath, she prays to the Traveler. At first, she was enemies with it, and then later tried to become a collector, only to now become a supplicant. This allows us to read into her intent before even obtaining the light. Savathun's dialogue implies that she did not view the Traveler as a foe even before her death. The Traveler didn't respond to her. Well, not directly. Ghosts came from the Traveler, and by extension, can be understood as an extension of the Traveler's will. It's only once Savathun dies and sheds her previous identity of a hive god that a ghost resurrects her. Ghost only bringing back the dead ties into the thematic leanings of the light. You can't change who you used to be, but you can change who you are now. By the way, the ghost that resurrected Savathun already had the hive ghost look, which means that the ghost was not modified by reviving Savathun. So I'm not sure if the ghosts that resurrected the hive all decided to copy this look, or if they all originally looked like that. I'm leaning more towards the first line of thought, because all the hive ghosts already having that type of shell has some deeper implications that I don't think are true. That was what I learned from the memory. Back at the altar, Savathun breaks through the horizon and reveals herself. We know from first-hand experience that after being revived by a ghost, we lose most of the memories of our past life. Technically, we do remember how to talk, walk, and the like, it's just that we don't have a specific memory attached with it. But I think this is just needlessly complicating the concept. This is where she reveals that she completely forgot about her past, and that we helped her remember. The Altar of Reflection is tied to the powers of darkness, but after being resurrected, Savathun only had the powers of the light. This is why her entire throne world is covered in a brand new lucent sheen. However, because she isn't able to harness the darkness anymore, she wasn't able to use the Altar of Reflection herself. She needed someone who could wield the darkness. Enter us, the Guardian. All of the items we collected were purposefully left in those locations by Savathun, and the information was then leaked to us. We obtained those items thinking that we were getting a one-up on Savathun as she was focused on the Traveler, but instead, Savathun was guiding us the entire time. I imagine the situation after Savathun was resurrected was similar to ours. After being revived, our ghost warned us that this location wasn't safe, and then started to guide us out. I assume that Savathun's ghost did something similar, except she ended up reuniting with the rest of the hive after escaping the lost city instead. Those hive members probably then went on to explain the situation to Savathun. In a multi-layered plan, Savathun then set out on capturing the Traveler before the Witness and his Black Fleet arrives, under the justification of trying to keep the Traveler safe. We, as Lightbearers, also have a connection to the Traveler and also wish to keep it safe, but we are opposed to Savathun and the Hive. So, while we have the same goal in the end, our methods are completely different. Of course, Savathun is aware of these conditions, but she is still not interested in playing nice with us Guardians, even if we have the same goal. To be fair though, the Vanguard would most likely also reject working with Savathun for the exact same reason. So, while Savathun worked on sealing the Traveler away in her throne world, she also had to do something about the Vanguard who wished to stop her. Thus, when Mars reappeared, she revealed her flagship. This lured us into our throne world. I suppose we only escaped because she let us, but then it becomes weird why we never questioned why Savathun would let us escape in the first place. Regardless, Savathun now knows that we have access to her throne world because she gave it to us, but we think that we've snuck in. You know what happens from there. This was a pretty 300 IQ plan from Savathun. The only real issue I have with it is her revealing it to us in the end. Savathun suddenly lost her mastermind abilities and completed her transition into a Bond villain. In this situation, after she revealed this information, it makes absolutely no sense for us to have been able to escape while Savathun was here the entire time. Why didn't Savathun try to close off the portal? Then the mission could have been us trying to make our way out because Savathun would think that we were trapped inside this realm. Instead, she just shows up, thanks us, and then lets us escape when that goes against everything she was trying to accomplish. She had 10 whole seconds from when our ghost had to remind us that we should skedaddle, and even longer to set up beforehand. This is a crucial mistake that jeopardizes her whole plan when it doesn't fit her character to even make this mistake in the first place. Remember, this isn't a mistake she's making by lacking some required knowledge or us gaining the upper hand in an unexpected way. This was a situation that she set up and was in complete control over. Regardless, the revelation that the Traveler gave Savathun the light is one that casts a wide shadow over our own relationship with those very same paracausal powers. We return to the tower and find ourselves in some random alleyway before joining the Vanguard meeting.
So, you're saying Savathun was dead? Our most devious adversary, the one who nearly decimated the last city from within, was dead. And the Traveler resurrected her?
I wouldn't have believed it either, but
But why would she need us to recover her memories if she never lost them in the first place?
This has to be another trick. A lie to fool us into surrendering the Traveler without a fight.
This has been the Traveler's approach from the beginning. The Books of Sorrow detail many civilizations it blessed with the light, then abandoned.
Hive propaganda.
The Fallen tell the same story. When the Witness and its Black Fleet came to call, the Traveler moved on to our system.
Or it sacrificed itself to save humanity from the same forces. Forces which included the Hive! After all that, why would the Traveler give our worst enemy the light?
It doesn't matter. I don't know why the Traveler gave Savathun the light. Maybe it has changed its mind about Guardians. Maybe it's not as infallible as we once believed. I don't know, and it doesn't matter. Because I'm here to protect humanity. And if Savathun takes the Traveler, we lose our light, along with any hope for surviving the Witness's return. So, whatever it takes to stop this heist, we will do.
All right. How do we stop this?
I'm not sure yet, but I know where to find out.
There isn't actually too much I can analyze about this cutscene, but there are a few points I can talk about. The first is that this action obviously caused a lot of doubt to arise in the members of the Vanguard. This includes a couple of whom I have not been introduced to. What is interesting is that while Zavala places his trust in the Traveler, it seems more out of duty, and what the Traveler has given him and the rest of humanity. Eris points out how the Traveler has a history of abandoning civilizations, like the Elixni, but Zavala counters this by using the Traveler's actions itself as his defense. Ikora is the one to bring the Vanguard together with her words. She doesn't know what the Traveler meant by its actions, but she doesn't really care about it. If Savathun seals off the Traveler, then humanity will lose its light in the face of the Witness. This would all but ensure the success of the second collapse. If we're dead, we won't even be able to debate the intentions of the Traveler. Even though Zavala is the Vanguard leader, that position has been a heavy burden on him, and so he's been completely focused on the immediate threat of Savathun. Ikora is a little bit more detached, and since she is one of the most adept light bearers, she holds a greater devotion to the Traveler and the mysteries of the light. This allows her to take a look at the broader picture and refine what our goal should be. We weren't able to visit the altar to view the memory attached to the worm, and doing so now would not be possible. However, Ikora has a plan. We talk to her back in the tower. Ikora reiterates that according to the Hive legend, Savathun was born on a far-off planet where she would have lived an uneventful life if it wasn't for her worm. This is where Ikora suggests that the worm familiar we picked up from Sathona's temple might not actually be a statue, which I thought we already cleared up. She somehow reaches the conclusion that we picked up the worm familiar after it calcified from age. The conclusion itself seems reasonable, but I have no idea how I was ever meant to figure this one out. But apparently, hive worms can undergo calcification. I guess that's good to know. This fact makes me go back to my confusion on what Mara did to Savathun, and now I'm convinced that when Savathun escaped, she did so with her worm, which is how we were able to find it. Ikora tells us that this would explain why we couldn't unlock this memory with the others. Savathun might not even know that there's a memory we can read from the worm, or that we even have it, which is why our access to the Altar of Reflections was blocked. I suppose that means that Savathun implemented an advanced Ahamkara trap in order to protect her worm, which is also why she might have just ignored the scorn in her temple. We do have a MacGuffin by the ways of the relic on Mars. Conveniently for us, the relic is able to manipulate time and slice into the past. So not only is it relevant for weapon crafting, but it also now plays a crucial part in the story as well. Shout out to the Witness for this one. We end our conversation here on the tower and meet up with Ikora and Eris on Mars.
These frail siblings will soon be claimed by the light. Unless we claim them first, we will tell the most cunning sibling of a cataclysm, a prophecy of great loss. We will feed her fear, her pride. We will say, young Sathona, the end is coming. A great cataclysm. A god wave. In the sky, there is only death. But salvation lies in the deep. Lead your sisters down. Your coming will spare their short lives, and you will be reborn, the Witch Queen, Savathun.
They were tricked. The hive were lied to.
This cutscene gave me chills when I played through the campaign, and it still does now. The first half is fairly self-explanatory. Ikora inputs the worm into the relic and manages to achieve some sort of resonance. Now, the second half is when the spice gets stuck in the back of her throat. First of all, it seems like I should establish that this is an abstract recreation of a memory from a calcified worm being shown to Ikora. Since she wanted Eris and I to join her, I will assume that this vision is also then being shown to us. This is a simplified events taking place because having to account for us not seeing this vision makes things strictly worse for no good reason. On a meta level though, I don't think the animators of Bungie were concerned with obscuring information at this point. This worm is our answer. While falsifying information for a full CGI cutscene would be a 600 IQ move, it would also be a major waste of time and resources. Besides, it's not like there are a ton of visual details to point out. If we look at the sky, I'm able to count 5 celestial bodies. The main center of attraction, though, is the lone island in the middle of a vast body of liquid. It could be water, space water, or even liquid metal. It doesn't really matter, though. As we zoom in, we see Oryx, Zebu-Arath, and Savathun before their hive god transformation. The cutscene focuses on Sathona and her worm. It's here that we can make out the surface she's standing on. The land is quite barren, with the only standout feature being the purple-leaved trees in the background. Around Sathona, there's a case of stairs leading into the liquid as well as some rubble. I can't even begin to guess at what structures existed here before this disaster took place. That's it for the fun visual details though. The importance of the cutscene was narrated to us by the voice in the darkness. The witness called these pre-hive gods frail siblings. They then revealed that they will soon be claimed by the light. This is confirmation that the Traveler was going to grant the hive the light before Ghost even came to be. Somehow, the witness caught onto this plan and acted before the Traveler. They identified Sathona as the most cunning of the siblings and warned her of a great cataclysm, one probably similar to the collapse that humanity later faced. Sathona being the most cunning also implies that she had the most intelligence, which is where the mentioned pride comes into play. Through some sort of method, the witness warned Sathona of the arrival of the Traveler and the destruction it would bring. By giving her this prophetic warning, and I assume the worm, the witness was able to con Sathona by providing them with the power of the darkness. And that's all the witness needed to do. If the witness gave them commands on what to do and how to resist the so-called God Wave, then Savathun would have perhaps caught onto some greater machinations. However, by simply providing her with a choice to accept such power, when the darkness transformed them into hive gods, Savathun was given a much lesser reason to doubt the information she was told before with this now built implicit trust. As the scene zooms out, we are able to see the worm gods. I don't know if this means that this location is the Deep, or if this was Savathun's home world, or if they are just being merged together for visuals. It looks epic though, so the animators succeeded in their job, just like we have. This is the first time we've gained the upper hand on Savathun, and this new revelation flipped the script entirely. The witness gaslit Sathona and was the orchestrator of the hive's entire existence. The pre-darkness hive would have been aligned with the light and could have been a potential ally to humanity. Instead, we've become adversaries, and for many years have been fighting each other, making the cleanup job that much easier for the witness. However, this is not information we should know about, and thus, this will be the hidden blade that will allow us to cut Savathun down. We return to Ikora, who reiterates what we just saw seconds prior. This changes everything. Okay, it doesn't actually, and Ikora realizes that this is the case. Still, this information does change up our following plan of attack. Even though Savathun was tricked and is one of the Travelers chosen, the results she desires are at odds to the survival of humanity. The hive ritual to steal away the Traveler is already underway, but now we can actually stop it. Revealing this hidden memory to Savathun should disrupt her concentration by forcing her to question her entire existence. This in turn should stop the ritual from succeeding because we should interfere at that point. How we're going to handle Savathun from there on out though is still being drafted. We find ourselves in Savathun's throne world, where the ritual has already transported the traveler. As I reach the fortress's entrance, I notice some Scorn raiders that are engaged in combat with some hive acolytes. I continue in. Our ghost expresses frustration with the traveler not doing anything to stop Savathun. Even now, our ghost still cannot comprehend the fact that Savathun is a light bearer. Just like how our ghost chose to revive us, another ghost chose to revive her. To the traveler, the hive and humanity are simply both forces that he has granted equal power to. Savathun choosing to seal the traveler away in her throne world is just as legitimate of an action to the traveler as us wanting to keep the traveler over the lost city if the traveler's ultimate goal is to survive. As we reach the fluorescent canal, we receive a status update from Ikora. For one reason or another, the ritual has caused the Scorn to flock to the fortress. The hive are responding to the Scorn by sending in reinforcements, as the ritual must not be disturbed. This makes our task of stopping the ritual a little bit more troublesome, but not that much more difficult. In fact, we are able to take care of most of the troops in our initial encounter right outside the fortress, then the path forward might be easier than it otherwise would have been. The Scorn and the hive have escalated their conflict as we reach the entryway of Savathun's fortress. Instead of just witnessing a fight between some scrouting raiders and acolytes, we entered the fray against some abominations and knights. I start off the fight fire snapping a Scorn wraith. The initial damage from the snap doesn't kill it, but that's only the first half of the effect. After waiting another second, the scorch stacks from the snap causes an ignition. After that, I activate some bracers and toss out a few nades. You know the drill by now. I Phoenix dive down and utilize the same trick again. My Nox Perennial takes out the next few knights and wizards. As I make my way to the Scorn chieftain fending off the hive knights, I shoot out a rocket at the much larger Lucent knight standing menacingly in the background. Contrary to my expectations, the rocket did not kill the Lucent knight. Nonetheless, I use my Nox in order to take out the two lesser knights and the chieftain. Yes, I did end up shooting the chieftain while it was still fully immune at first, but I messed up my understanding of the timing of the charge. This caused me to not kill either the knight or chieftain, but I did break up their squabble and force them to focus on me. I finished off the knight that chased me down while acolytes swarmed the Scorn chieftain. The solar nades from some bracers cleanses the rest of the battlefield. I crushed the Lucent Knight's ghost only for an ogre to walk out of the portal right behind me. Ikora tells us to hold our fire, but that's only after I dumped a bunch of my ammo into it anyway. Ikora flies in and one-taps the ogre. She reminds us that the status of the traveler is what matters in the end, and to not let anything else distract us. Ikora then Kamehamehas the portal in order to clear our way forward. The upper level of the fortress loomed over us the entire time we explored Savathun's throne world, but now, at long last, we can begin our siege in the Court of Thorns. Ikora notes that hundreds of Scorn have arrived at the entrance of the fortress. The ritual is only growing stronger, which means our time is running out. Crossing the bridge starts off fairly simple, but two ogres halt my progress. I jumped up but forgot that I'm a warlock somehow, so I didn't fall behind cover fast enough and died. While it doesn't matter here, it is something that I should remember not to do for when I face off against Savathun proper. Reinforcements arrive in the form of a battalion of acolytes headed by one that bears the light. I almost forget to finish off the ghost, but remember to do so after turning around. Our ghost reminds us that we need to find a way to the top. This is where we place down our first campaign banner. I observe the phenomenon taking place below me, but I'm far too high up to make out any details. I drop down and this starts the encounter. I glance at the middle of the room and am able to make out that there are two crystals which are linked to Shielded Wizard. The immunity shield, along with there being specifically two crystals, clued me into what I needed to accomplish, so I jumped on over to the right side of the room first. I took the high ground with a single jump. While doing so, I traced the location of the energy blast in my peripheral vision back to a wizard near the back of the room. Two acolytes tried to block me, but a fire snap incinerates them away. After activating sunbracers, I toss out a few solar nades at the blistered wizard. While in the air, I ended up getting stuck on a spike on a decorative post, and so I Phoenix dived backwards in order to stay alive. I turned the corner and realized that the wizard ended up dying to one of my nades. Somehow, it still took me several more seconds to turn around and notice that there was a surprise hive portal behind me. Above the portal, there were 3 symbols in the order of a Tesla, a funeral pyre, and a Tesla once more. Walking through the green gate teleports me up several floors. The room to the right of me was an overhang with a bunch of hive enemies. I clear them out and finish off the hive knight before turning my attention to the no longer protected crystal floating in the air. The sound of a chain shattering echoes out. This signified something happening, but I wasn't exactly sure what. I walked forward to the next section of the top floor, but my approach was far too reckless. The shrieker in the sky and the thralls on the ground forced me to drop my well of radiance in order to just not die. Once I killed the wizards, I could destroy the second crystal. I continued to the final side of the horseshoe, but another shrieker almost killed me, which forced me to slow down. After that, I finished off a knight and could blow up the final crystal. In that last room, 3 portals embossed into the walls lit up. However, I didn't initially see the symbols on top of them. Thus, I walked through the middle portal on pure instinct, as I was unsure of which one I needed to go through. Savathun's laughter echoes through the halls as I end up back in the main room. It's clear from this that I failed. At the same time, I wasn't exactly sure why, although I had a guess. Instead of going back to the same portal, I took a detour to the left side of the room. I killed the wizard and was able to observe the symbols before the portal activated. This time, it's Brick Brick Tesla. This section is structured in an identical manner to the previous section. The map layout is a bit different though, and there are some hive ogres instead of hive knights or wizards, which helps in changing up the general pace of the gameplay. After destroying the 3rd crystal, the portals activate once more. However, this time around is when I finally noticed that there are symbols above the portals. This one was not a match, but the portal right next to it was the correct one. Traveling through it takes me to a room where I'm able to pick up a void charge. I then dunk said void charge into its vessel back in the main room. This drops the immunity shield around the 1st crystal, but I don't bother shitting it and instead make my way back to the other portal room. My progress has been saved, so I don't need to bother clearing out any more ads. However, as I take a look at the runes above the portals, I notice that none of them are what I needed to match with. This makes me think that I wasted time by clearing all of the rooms. I probably only needed to destroy the crystal in the room that had the correct portal. I can't confirm this since I already cleared everything, but my guess is pretty safe. I end up spotting the correct portal soon after. I dunk the void charge and insta-pop my well. This is when I also destroy both of the crystals and free the Lucent Wizard. I go through my usual Sunbraces rotation, but kill the wizard with my Apex Predator. Instead of just finishing the ghost, I waste some time by killing some ads instead. This causes enough time to elapse, and thus when I do actually go to finish the ghost, it had enough time to revive the wizard, forcing me to kill it again. This was a fairly simple task to re-accomplish. However, I would have died to the wizard if my Phoenix Hive wasn't off cooldown. My act of finishing off this ghost ends this first encounter. While this section wasn't difficult in terms of ad density or a boss encounter, the crystal mechanics along with the portal memory minigame did enough to vary up the gameplay while serving as an appetizer for what I knew was ahead. After taking the portal up, I collected my loot and jumped onto the lift. It's only now that Savathun decides to greet us. She feigns shock at our return, but only for a moment, before shattering that illusion. Savathun claims that she is omnipresent in her throne world. Every action, every thought, it's all decipherable by Savathun. While there might be some validity to this claim, we know that this can't be completely true. Savathun might be aware of us stealing her calcified worm, but she can't know about the knowledge we acquired from it. Or at least if she does, her actions and tone of voice don't reflect this discovery to me. We sprint through a ribbed tunnel and end up on a platform that spirals the dome above us. While some hive troops slow me down, they aren't anything that I haven't seen before. I want to mention that being able to observe the entirety of the throne world from so high up results in a fantastic view. It is unfortunate that I didn't take more time to smell the roses, and on a revisit of this place, I would love to do so. To be honest, the threat of Savathun and her ritual worked in making my brain go into rush mode, even though I knew that nothing would actually happen until I arrived. That is a pretty good issue to have though, all things considered. The hive draft propelling me upwards failed as I neared the top, but after my initial descent, The draft succeeded the second time around. With this, we've entered the Sanctum of the Brood Queen. I drop down the second campaign banner as the Traveler's death knell rings out from the bell above. The dark rhythm adorned onto the silence set the tone of what was to come as I climbed the final set of stairs.
I'm so glad you're here to see this.
I fired the first arrow. Savathun had a temporary immunity shield, so I worked on repositioning myself behind some cover. Savathun's health bar has 2 segments, but the first one is only around 5% in of her total health. This segmentation lies in opposition of the precedent set before. An ignition from Tiku's deals enough damage to break this barrier, but nothing out of the ordinary occurs. I'm not sure what the purpose of this would be, but my best guess is that it acts as a damage gate, so you can't just delete Savathun's health as soon as a fight starts. Savathun almost kills me, so I activate my super. Savathun can't kill me in this position, and so, after a few shots, I initiated my devious rotation. Unfortunately, I messed up in an egregious manner. I accidentally switched to my Apex Predator first. The rocket connected and did a decent amount of damage, but it wasn't what I intended to do. I needed to hit Savathun with my next perennial right after Tiku's in order to activate my bait and switch perk for the extra 30% damage. You already know that by now, but I really needed to stretch this video out even further. While this rocket brought Savathun down to just under half health, my next rocket from my bait and switch activated Apex Predator missed. This is when the ads started to spawn in. I guess this is what could have been tied to the health gate. Savathun moves out of my vision, which leads me to getting distracted by an ogre in the background. I kill it and only refocus on Savathun as one of her attacks knocks me out of my well for half a second. A second rocket hits Savathun, and this is when Savathun teleports away. Her health at this point is close to where the reverse of the first segment would be. Since Savathun is the hive god of cunning, then perhaps this is a subtle fourth wall trick. After Savathun dips, I make my way to hide underneath some sort of protective tower. However, I didn't really like the first location due to it being so closed in due to the walls behind me, so I moved towards the northwestern tower. There are 2 openings, one that faced the south and one that looked east. Using the sides of the walls inside, I was able to peek at the Lucent Hive reinforcements while staying protected. I started shooting at a Lightbearer wizard, but as it scurries away, an ogre in the background distracted me. A Lightbearing acolyte takes this time to close the distance and activates its super. I avoided most of the blades from its barrage. The acolyte hid behind a tree, which neutralized my ability to retaliate. The Lucent Knight is quick to step in though. Tiku's hipfire targeting is a little loose, and so sometimes I held onto my arrow in order to make sure they would hit the correct target. The knight tosses a suppressor grenade, but I don't see it and almost die. The suppressed debuff is tough because for a whole 5 seconds, I can't use Phoenix Dive to heal, and with low health, this is when I'm the most vulnerable. While I am spamming the button during suppression, by the time it wears off, my health is regenerating naturally anyway. I played peekaboo with the Lucent Hive as my main goal for now was trying not to die. I focused my attention on the acolyte first, but that's because the wizard refused to move up, and the knight decided to retreat. Even though I'm the one chasing the acolyte, it turns around and bum rushes me, which makes finishing its ghost a much easier task. Some hive ads spawn in behind me, but funnily enough, the Lucent Knight suppression grenade kills them as it's a light-based attack. The wizard activates its super and rushes me down. I take 2 sudden bursts of damage, one unknown and the second from the wizard in front of me. This was the exact moment I was holding my second Well of Radiance for. I killed the wizard and then move on to the repositioned knight. I almost forgot to crush the ghost, but I turned around in time to notice. You would have thought that I remembered how this whole ghost thing worked considering I have one myself. Savathun reveals herself a few moments after, but she barely has any health remaining.
There's her ghost.
I approach her ghost, but become thread-bound. Savathun is revived by her ghost before deciding to vanish right in front of us. As soon as I'm freed, I run back behind some cover, but Savathun decides to speak to us instead. Fight, run. The pattern is always the same for you. She rhetorically questions if we ever get tired of this pattern, if we ever wish to escape. While this observation by Savathun is true, it is quite the simplified reduction of our actions. Besides the actual physical events that took place, the intent of why we did what we did is something that is not being considered. You could also interpret this line as a meta fort wall break if you desire, but I don't. A bridge forms and connects to an island in the distance, one that looks quite similar to the one we saw in the vision of the calcified worm. Savathun gives up on us and turns our attention to our ghost. Through a series of unfortunate events, we accepted the gift of stasis, an element of the darkness. Those events also ended up causing Savathun to lose her powers of the darkness and gain the light. Devoid of context, this reversal positions Savathun as the more virtuous agent in the eyes of the Traveler, as she is an untainted light-bearer. Although we are burdened, one of the core lessons we've learned is that light and dark are paracausal tools that are detached from any notion of mortality. Our ghost slams Savathun and nails her down by detailing her list of crimes.
There's her ghost. I remember Oryx and the Taken. I remember what you did to the Awoken and the Dreaming City. I'll never forget what happened to Sagira, to Osiris. I would die before I ever chose to help the Hive.
After a moment of silence, we reach the island. The giant figure of Savathun dissipates. I take a few steps back because I'm thinking that I missed a campaign banner, but since I saw no circle on the ground, I continued forward. To my surprise, this initiated the encounter with Savathun. I attacked Savathun with Tikas, but even after several shots, her health bar did not shift. Realizing that nothing was happening, I made my way towards the structure in the distance. On the high ground, I repeated my volley of attacks. After enough damage, she realizes that she's too powerful in her current form. Somehow we need to reactivate the portal to the altar and show Savathun these hidden memories. This next phase causes several Witch Queen projections to spawn right next to me. I attempted to flee, but the multiple projections chained their attacks together and caused my death. Our light is not restricted in this area though, and that clued me into the fact that there would be another phase after this encounter. And so, as I did my best not to die, I steeled myself for the gauntlet ahead. I sprint up the platform and killed the first knight. After that was my first proper fight against a projection of Savathun. I deal most of my damage with Tikus before finishing her off with my apex predator. Upon death, the projection drops the glass breaker buff. Picking it up directs us towards the middle, but there's another projection that I can still take care of. From behind the potted mini garden in front of me, I nick down the health of the second projection and collect another stack of the buff. This is when I turn my attention towards the center of the island. I want the jump to go smoothly, but the remaining projection deals enough damage to force out my Phoenix dive. I deposit both of the buffs, but I still need one more contribution. Behind a rather large potted trimmed hedge, I drop down my Will of Radiance. This location strategically allowed me to deal with the major Hive Ogre reinforcement and the remaining projection without having to move. I break the final pane of glass and enter the Altar of Reflection. Party City has taken over the location. Our ghost reveals to us that Savathun is casting a spell and is spinning a web around the Traveler. A not-to-scale visual is represented above the altar. I thought that Savathun was supposed to be a moth, due to the small moths of light and the fact that her wings resemble said insect. I never got spider vibes from Savathun, so initially this theming was kinda weak to me. The best I had was that Savathun spins webs like she spins lies. But apparently there are moths that can create webs. Not the elegant spider-like webs you typically think of, but instead the disgusting fuzzy webs. So contrary to what I first thought, this does work even if some creative liberties were taken for the physical and thematic aesthetics of the scene. In the altar room, there are 3 portals that are tethered to 3 towers in the distance. Looking beyond the towers reveals a colossal representation of Savathun and a Black Fleet pyramid. I don't really have time to think about that right now though, and head through one of the portals. It teleports us to its respective tower. This is where we are able to kill a Thread Weaver and obtain the Thread Cutter buff. Savathun questions our intentions as we repeat this action 2 more times. We return to the altar and place down the calcified worm. Savathun receives the memory. She is no doubt questioning how true this information is, and if this information is true, how could she have missed us? In any case, our plan seems to be a success. We have rattled Savathun's mind, and now she is inviting us to play in her game.
Then let's play.
I find myself back at the main island with Savathun. This time, Savathun takes damage, but a single explosion from Tiki's barely made a dent. I probably should have saved some time and used my Apex Predator, but I played it safe and whittled her away from a distance. We meet the threshold, and Savathun disappears. With this, we can return back to the altar. Some cursed thralls try to ruin our day, but I take care of them before heading through another portal. I'm sent back to the tower, but since I'm staring at a wall this time around, it takes me a second to realize what is happening. I walked to the other side and picked up some deep sight. I did not expect this mechanic to return, but I'm glad it did. Using it, we take some platforms up to a higher level on the tower. It's here that we can kill a Thread Weaver and pick up the Thread Cutter buff. Savathun questions our identity. With the memory we presented, we have become the expert of trickery. Cunning is tied to Savathun's nature, and thus by us usurping that position of authority, we force Savathun to question her own identity. Back at the altar, a troop of thralls and cursed thralls rush us. A projection of Savathun harasses us in the background while we fight the trash. After slaying the projection, I am able to repeat the process 2 more times. I place the worm onto the altar. The witness talks about how it will feed upon Savathun's fear and pride in order to trick her to the darkness. In response, Savathun wishes for the voice to explain who she was to herself, since it was presenting itself as a greater being. It's a little delayed, but we're sent back to the main island. This is where we can place down our 3rd campaign banner. I started the first round off with my same strategy as the previous 2 bouts. I sprinted up the left side stairs, but this time I noticed a difference. There was some sort of moving blue aura that I recognized as being part of a larger bubble. I then made the assumption that this mechanic was probably attached to Savathun. After figuring out who it belonged to, I started to figure out why it existed and what its purpose was. Since I thought it was a barrier, I then made an educated guess. Shooting Savathun outside of the barrier was probably what this was meant to stop. By forcing us to damage the Witch Queen in such close quarters, we also have to practice our best safety habits in staying alive. My second try starts off worse than it should. I waste a Fire Snap and have to use an early Phoenix Dive. That's quite a bit of value loss. The initial chunk I knocked out from Savathun's health stays missing. It does make this fight a bit easier, but it's such a small chunk of health that I'm not too pressed about it since it does streamline the fight. In order to damage Savathun any further, I needed to reacquire the Thread Cutter buffs. This is done by killing the Thread Weavers around the perimeter of the island while Savathun stays in the middle. The boss in the middle design is a pretty standard encounter. I will say that this iteration is still easier than the Vorgath fight. There is plenty of cover to protect you from Savathun's line of sight. The Thread Weavers are also fairly easy to kill, and while the adds are tougher, the density does not match the power level I am at now. The Thread Cutter buff also does not have a timer attached to it, so there isn't even the additional pressure created by a time crunch. Well, I say that, but once I obtain the 3rd stack of the Thread Cutter buff, the countdown begins. We only get 45 seconds to deal damage to Savathun. So I continue my clockwise rotation. Upon reaching the bottom of the stairs, I drop down my Well of Radiance and execute a standard bait and switch rotation. This first instance of damage was a success, and I had some more time, so I tried to go for another. Unfortunately, I miscounted the timer in my head by 2 seconds. This led me to try to reproc the bait and switch perk while it still had yet to expire. Savathun then dodged my third rocket. This damage phase was a success though when you consider what I accomplished overall. I cleared about half of the Witch Queen's total health. By all accounts, this would be a potential 2 phase as long as I didn't miss any more rockets, or die. Even a super short third phase would not have been the end of the world. I do a little more damage to Savathun before the buff runs out. While I take care of the ads, I decided to take a shot at Savathun just to see what would happen without the buff. It turns out that I could in fact still damage her. And for the sake of science, I had to test out how much I could deal without the third cutter buffs. I hit every single shot and rocket, but this barely knocked off 5% from her total health. This was not worth it, but it does provide a bit of clarity. Breaking Savathun's line of sight when you're in her bubble proved more troublesome than I expected. I really should have died to this Threadweaver, but I just dodged its flurry a mere moment earlier. Not having to deal with Savathun's arc lightning bolts for a few seconds was all I needed to regain momentum. The situation does get a bit dicey a little later though, because although I kill the third Threadweaver, as I turn around to escape, I end up running directly into a cursed thrall. I almost die, but since I killed the other ads, I could take this time to recover. Sure, the buff timer was counting down, but I can't kill Savathun if I'm dead myself. I did eventually find my way back to her. My supercharged up in the nick of time and aids in keeping me alive. My damage rotation hits Savathun. However, I somehow ended up not finding any heavy ammo bricks, so I could only hit Savathun with 1 rocket. Turns out that I would have to 3-phase Savathun after all. The third run around the island was the least exciting, mainly because I broke Savathun's line of sight in just a few seconds. It also seems like there are considerably less ads in general. Not having to dodge cursed thralls really reduces the overall threat. Well of Radiance charges up after I obtain the third buff. This allows me to take up a super aggressive position and I take out the Witch Queen.
Isn't this interesting? I miscalculated. So did you, Guardian. So protective of your traveler that you wouldn't let me keep it safe. But the witness is coming. The game is yours to play now. Yours to win or lose. Just don't say I didn't warn you.
No. Where did her ghost go?
Guardian, I just got the message. The Traveler is back in the last city. Is it done? Is Savathun...
She's dead. But her ghost got away.
Good enough. Hold your position. The Hidden are coming to secure the remains. Good work, Guardian. You did the right thing.
Now what?
Now, we prepare for the witness and stop the next collapse.
We smote Savathun, however her ghost escaped. Since it happened along with the Traveler, to me it almost seems like the Traveler purposefully prevented us from destroying Savathun's ghost.
We have seen enough. The children of soul cry out for salvation. You promise them life, but deliver only death, as you have for so many before. Enough. Enough death. Enough life. You have no pieces left to place. The game is over. Do not be afraid. Your pale heart holds the key. This time, there is no escape.
I don't really have anything to say about this final cutscene. It set up the witness while looking cool. All the planets being in one room is pretty epic, but it's a reminder that I've only been to like 5 of them. We return to Mars and convene with Ikora. Savathun is now technically dead, but the planets continue to spin. Amaru, her ghost, lives on. I have no idea how Ikora figured out the name of Savathun's ghost, but sure. The Scorn have also not stopped their siege in Savathun's throne world. These are some of the more immediate threats as the arrival of the Witness still looms over us. Even the Queen of the Awoken has a task for us. My commentary on the exotic quest will be appended to the end of my campaign cut video. For completing the campaign on legendary difficulty, Ikora presents us with 2 exotics. I ended up choosing the Osmiomancy gloves because that was the glove I was trying to grind before I even started the Witch Queen campaign. I enjoyed my time on Stasis and needed these gloves as it was what was recommended to me for a Stasis build on Warlock. I appreciate that the campaign has these as my reward as it was exactly what I was looking for. However, there is a very slight, completely minor problem with them. The stat total is 46 for some reason. 46 with a absolutely terrible distribution. What was Bungie thinking? Like, or 46? Am I being trolled? Hello? 46? I don't even think the starter equipment was ruled as low as a 46. This is a tragedy. In the meantime, I'd appreciate it if you could like this video if you enjoyed it. Check out my channel if you want to watch the rest of my Destiny thoughts. Otherwise, thanks for watching.